in the meeting, and then everyone out. So sorry, I have no idea what happened. But coming back. What did you hear up until we got the simulation refactor is happening and then got kicked out?
Backwards compatible, and then like
okay.
It's not a backwards compatible change.
Right. Yeah. So there are some non-backwards compatible changes. So in particular, the survey will no longer have the dpred method. That will be on the simulation. So the survey is going to be much more lightweight. It just keeps track basically of sources and receivers. And then perhaps a few utility functions, like in the frequency domain, the ability to sort by frequencies. So with that, I've also been looking at renaming modules to try and be a little more Pythonic. So looking at using lowercase names for modules and also trying to use less shorthand. So for example, in the survey, instead of src list, I've written that out as source list. It will still let you use src list. It's just going to throw a warning. And eventually we can start to delete these. So this is what I'm saying by like many of the changes we can make somewhat backwards compatible to try and not have this be too painful of a transition. But some things like the dpred is non-backwards compatible. I can throw a warning or I can throw a sensible error, but there's nothing we can do to like make the survey hand dpred back. It won't know how to do that. So with that, there's also, I've gone in and suggested some naming changes to modules. So for example, instead of saying FDEM, do we want to call it frequency domain? So from SimPEG electromagnetics, import frequency domain. And you could import it as FDEM if you wanted to continue like having sort of shorthand in your Python scripts or in your notebooks. But looking at favoring something that's a little more explicit, I think is a bit more newcomer friendly. But that said, I realize that this is a major change and want to get input from everybody and give everyone a chance to chime in before we start making all of these changes.
So Lindsay, is that going to run? If I run like a frequency domain EM in the simulation branch, is that going to run?
Right now, the frequency domain is up and running. So I've migrated most of the EM codes, and I'm in progress on the DC side of things. So the static codes are not going to work quite yet. I think DC should, but I haven't had a chance to go through DCIP and SIP in as much detail yet.
Okay. Yeah.
So working on that, but if people want to start playing, especially with frequency domain, time domain, or MT, please do. Then hopefully by the end of the next week or two, we'll have sort of first pass examples of them all up and running. But if you have a chance to chime in on this naming thing, I would really appreciate that because I can start doing that now. But it is going to be like a bit to untangle. And so prefer to only do it once. So hopefully we can get it right the first time. So yeah, feel free to like start playing and just kind of add your thoughts. I tried in the issue or in the comment thread to outline the major changes. So let me see if I can pull it up and share my screen real quick. So I don't know if you haven't seen. Can y'all see that? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So try to outline just like high-level major changes. I'll keep updating this as I go. But for example, the survey no longer has a dpred method. Survey also no longer has an eval method. I've gone in and tried to simplify the data class a bit. And so if you want to jump in and have a look at that, that would be great. The data class now has, so before it was very unclear where you were actually supposed to set the standard deviation and the noise floor. It was previously on the survey, which was super strange and led to some bugs that Mike pointed out earlier on. So what this would do is basically treat the data class as the single source of truth on the standard deviation and the noise floor. That said, if you wanted to go in and mess with like the phi d, the W matrix, you can do that. But like all of the noise information is going to be set on the data class. Yeah, so that I think is basically, so there's the main comments here, and then further down, I have left a few questions, but the main things are looking basically, we've got a conversation thread here going. Neil's jumped in and Dieter's jumped in. So feel free to add your thoughts. Yeah, and we can iterate from there. Cool. Any like immediate questions or like thoughts? You're like, oh no, please don't do this. This is a terrible idea.
What I was wondering, Lindsay, is I think that's a good idea if it's like clearer words to understand. But are you also going to update all the documentation then? Because that's important, of course, that's appearing there, how it should be used and not how it was used before. And that looks like it's a lot of work, no?
The API, so all the tools on how to use
that
stuff
will be
gets
automatic, yeah.
That's
But in the examples, everything will have to be rewritten, no?
super easy. Yeah, it's not much in the way of changes to that
Okay,
whole
perfect
structure. And we don't have enough stuff in SimPEG as far as tutorials yet to have to make changes to it. I've started making some things, but we haven't made a bunch of simulations yet. So it should be fine.
Okay, perfect then. Because I think that's important for people that don't know the code, and you don't find 10 different ways to do the same thing, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I think what I would perhaps like to do with this pull request, because it is so major, is basically we can get it up to a state where we're happy with it and consider it functioning and consider things up to date. And then I would like to like request basically that everyone, at least who sort of is much more familiar with SimPEG, start relying on it. Not yet. I'll send out messages when we think it's basically ready. But start relying on it and like just jump in and help bug hunt. Because I mean, we have very good test coverage, which is great. It makes a refactor like this possible. But at the same time, like there's still always little things that slip through the cracks and edge cases that weren't tested. And so it's going to take, yeah, everyone's help to make sure that we catch all that stuff. And then also like, if, you know, everybody can pick a different aspect of the examples to jump in and help with, then that gives only each person maybe 2 or 3 examples to look at and to make sure that it's up to date. So it absolutely is a lot of work, but I think between all of us, we can make it all happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically transform that branch in a new dev branch as we had 2 years ago.
Yeah, basically. I don't think we can chat about like the mechanics of how to actually do that, but basically treating it in a few weeks' time, perhaps like a dev branch that we'll build off of from there. And to this, like if you have branches that we want to sort of merge this stuff into, we can either do that when we're together at IUBG, like set up calls to basically migrate branches over, because I realized that like this is going to touch basically all of the code. And so any branches that are beyond master right now, that includes sort of your research work, there's going to be things to sort through. And so I'm happy to help make that happen.
And just to make sure I understand sort of how this will work in running simulations in practice, we're going to have a set of problem-specific simulation classes. So whereas we had something like, do we have one global simulation class where we put in just like a survey and then a model and it's supposed to figure it out, or will we create like we just like normal, we'll be creating like I don't know, JB electromagnetic problem simulation, and that will accept a like an EM survey object and will accept a model. Like there's sort of like a problem specific simulation for each one, right?
So I'll try not to use the word problem because I think that's a source of confusion. So what I will replace that with is with a physics-specific simulation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, formulation-specific, physics-specific. Yeah.
Exactly. So we'll still have like from SimPEG like frequency domain electromagnetics, import simulation 3D.j. And so that will still function basically very similar to the problem that we had before, the problem class that we had before. But you no longer need to pair. You know how we had that step where it was like problem pair survey? We won't do that anymore. What you'll do is set simulation.survey equals survey. Or you can pass the survey when you instantiate the simulation.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page, just want to make sure.
Cool. Maybe one of the things we can do is next week, I'm happy to sort of like walk through what this is looking like, and we can go through it all together in a bit more detail. And hopefully by then we'll have an example of basically every simulation inside SimPEG up and running with this.
Okay.
Lindsay, I think that'd be great. I mean, I'm looking at where I am, and I'm, you know, there's a lot of things that seem really reasonable, but I'm not exactly sure I've got you know, a complete overview of the whole package so that you might be able to contribute in some way. So I think sort of laying it out like, okay, you guys, this is basically what we are, this is what we're doing, and does it all seem to make sense? Because everybody has got, you know, bringing a spectrum of problems that they've been interacting with over the years. So they've got, you know, survey geometry and data and instruments, and, you know, just want to make sure that it all kind of fits in a natural way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And this has also prompted some thoughts with respect to how we want to have like drivers or codes that run SimPEG, for example. And this is a conversation we can continue later on, but I really like what Plotly has done. So they have Plotly, which is the core library, and it's a fairly low-level API. And by that, I mean that it's really verbose if you want to make a plot with core Plotly. Then what they've done is they've built Plotly Express, which is like a lightweight layer on top of Plotly that is like makes more assumptions for you, but it also like is a little easier to use. So I think that some of the stuff that perhaps has been done by Soggy and Mike and everyone in the IODC class, and then by Dom in the driver class, we could start thinking about how to have that perhaps in like a separate module within SimPEG that is like a lightweight wrapper. So that's just something I wanted to like throw out there, and we can think about. I think it can be totally done separately from the simulation stuff, but something to think about down the road. Cool.
Sounds good.
Excellent. All right. Any other things that people would like to bring up before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think so. I've got like a very basic refactor of the SimPEG website, and I've got tutorials on models and mapping. Sarah's given me a review on that, and seems like you're quite happy with the state of those tutorials. I think it won't pass the Travis test due to some unrelated stuff. I think auto generation of the API, but yeah, I'd like to merge that in and not have it sit there for a long time. So undergone a review process, and I think it's pretty close to being brought in. So I'd like to do it before we forget about it and move on to the stuff.
Okay, I will do my best to get to it. There's a big backlog of PRs right now, so. Yeah, and if there's other people willing to jump in and help, I know Sarah's given it a review. Yeah, I mean, if Thibaut or Soggy or Dom, if you're also willing to jump in, that'd be great. But if not, we'll try and push it forward. And feel free to just like keep poking this stuff in, even at the next meeting if we haven't done anything by then. Keep bringing it up.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Thanks, Vince.
See you later.
Bye, Soggy.
Bye, John.
Bye, John.